Hey there, David Chesworth coming to you from the beautiful Hilton Head Island at Hilton Head Health, and today we have another exciting episode of Health Talk. And today we've got a very special guest talking about sleep and the importance of sleep and how it relates to your health, how you can get better sleep. Her name is Dr. Chelsie Rohrscheib. So, Chelsie, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you are a PhD neuroscientist, you're a sleep expert, you've been a sleep expert for over a decade in sleep science and medicine. You're currently working at Wesper, which is a sleep disorder diagnostic technology that makes sleep testing more affordable and accessible. Besides helping patients navigate their sleep, you're also passionate about educating the public on a wide range of health and science-related topics. And you have an interest in cognition and brain longevity. Did I miss anything about your introduction, Chelsie?
No, that you did a great job, and thank you so much for having me today.
This is such an important topic. So, I mean, as you know, Hilton Head Health, where I work, is a destination health weight loss retreat. And a lot of people, when they think of weight, they think about fitness and nutrition. But, our director of education, his name is Bob Wright. One of the things he often stresses to our guests is the importance of sleep and how it can really make or break in some cases. Whether or not you stick to your plan or not. So I'm curious, first and foremost with you, Chelsie, what drew you towards studying sleep to begin with? And, why do you want to help other people with improving their sleep?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say I fell into sleep accidentally as a specialization. So I started out with just general medicine in my undergrad. I was doing biomedical science, which is pretty much just a fancy way of saying the science of medicine. So it's how we figure out all of the medical things that we apply in hospitals. And I was studying a variety of topics ranging from cell biology, immunology, cardiology, neuroscience, you name it. And so when I went to do my graduate degree, my PhD, I stumbled into brain infections and neuroscience. And that led to studying how infections of the brain affected sleep specifically. So once I was really studying sleep for this topic, I started to get really, really interested in it. And it was just very fascinating learning about all of the things that sleep does for the brain and body. And the other aspect is I have always been kind of a bad sleeper myself, and sleep disorders run in my family. So there was a personal aspect of studying sleep. I've undergone 2 sleep studies myself to identify if I had any issues. And I think it was just a way of trying to figure out my own sleep problems. But that's the short answer. And then it kind of evolved from there.
So really, it was a combination of what you were already studying and learning that there were certain, did you say infections that can actually affect sleep? So
Yeah.
that's actually something, I believe it or not, I haven't heard that before. What are some examples of infections that can disrupt sleep?
Really any infection. So anything that's going to raise your temperature or cause your immune system to really ramp up its activity will affect your sleep. We can go more into that later when we talk about all the things that sleep actually accomplishes. But there's a direct relationship between sleep and your immune system. So when one changes, the other changes.
That makes perfect sense. And so that combined with your personal and familial history with sleep really kind of made it the perfect fit for you to start helping others with this.
Absolutely. And sleep affects everybody. I mean, everybody has to sleep. We do it for 7 to 9 hours a night. So it's obviously very important. And it affects every single aspect of your life. If you're not sleeping well, it affects your health, your well-being, your social life, your work, your education. So it's such a broad, wide-reaching topic.
So I'm probably going to butcher this quote, so I'll just say it's a paraphrase, but I've heard someone say before, I've heard it said before that sleep must be important, otherwise it'd be the biggest evolutionary mistake in history because we're very vulnerable for 7 to 9 hours during the day. So why do we even sleep? What is the purpose of it? What happens when we sleep?
That's a great question. So most people, when they think about sleep, they just think, well, it's a way to, shut down your body for 8 hours and re-energize. But sleep is actually a very dynamic process. there's a lot of functions that happen in the brain and body that don't actually get accomplished when we're awake. So I'll just name some of the big ones, and we're always discovering the new functions of sleep every single year. So science is very active in this field, and it seems like every 3 to 5 years we discover something new. So the big one is, first and foremost, sleep repairs the brain and body. So during our deepest stages of sleep, we repair all of the damage that we accumulated over the day to our DNA, cells, tissues, and organs. Another big function is that we strengthen our immune system. So our immune system makes new antibodies and new immune cells that are necessary for keeping us healthy and avoiding pathogens, infections, and things like cancer as well. We release a lot of hormones when we sleep. One of the main hormones we release is human growth hormone, which is a big one, which is really essential for our body health and especially for kids and adolescents for their growth. But adults need it to maintain health as well. And we also release a lot of sex hormones too, so things like testosterone and estrogen as well. In the brain, our sleep repairs our neurons. So these are the cells that are communicating in the brain that actually control everything in the body and allow us to be conscious. So every single night, our sleep goes to work on these cells and not only maintains their health, but also kind of gets them back to a normal state. So I always say, think of the brain kind of like a computer. If you're running your computer all day long and you've got a bunch of programs in the background, your computer's going to get really slow and sluggish. And what's the best way to get your computer running back at, normal capacity? It's rebooting your computer. So sleep is kind of like rebooting those neurons and rebooting the brain. More recently, we figured out that sleep actually cleanses the brain. The brain uses a lot of energy. 1/3 of our total energy goes to the brain. And when we metabolize energy, we cause these toxic wastes. Well, these toxic wastes will build up in the brain and they can be very damaging to our neurons. Our neurons are very sensitive, they're very prone to damage. And once your neurons are gone, they're gone for good. So sleep employs this mini sewer system that washes all these wastes away at night. And this keeps the brain very clean and functioning. We know a lot of these toxic wastes are associated with diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So there's a really, really strong correlation between chronically poor sleep and developing these diseases because you're not getting that brain cleansing. Now, as far as cognitive function, the sleep is super important for turning short-term memories into long-term memories. So our brain stores everything we learn over the day in a short-term storage area, but that needs to get converted and put into a long-term storage area. And that primarily happens during REM sleep when we dream. And then finally, sleep works on the emotional centers of our brain, specifically an area of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for the stress response and emotions. So sleep is kind of like a mini therapy session for your brain, so you're not as reactive to stressful stimuli when you're awake. And that's the quick overview. And like I said, we're always learning new things every single year. So, next year we'll probably make some big discovery.
So the cleaning happens, memory storage is happening, immune system gets stronger. So why 7 to 9 hours specifically so I guess this is a two-part question. What's so special about that range of time as part one, and part two is, could it be just as beneficial to get, multiple segments of 3 or 4 hours to add up to the 7 to 9, or is it better to have it all happen consecutively?
Mm-hmm. So the research is very, very clear, and this is a very extensively studied topic. Adults require 7 to 9 hours. The specific amount you need is really dependent on your genetics. So your brain and body may be more efficient at accomplishing all of those biological functions in 7 hours than somebody else who might need 9 hours. Now, the reason we need that much time is because we have to spend a certain amount of time in those deeper, more restorative stages of sleep, specifically stage 3 non-REM deep sleep or slow wave sleep, and REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep when we dream, to do all of those functions I just mentioned. So, I mean, if you think about it, it would be really, really hard to accomplish all those things in a much shorter amount of time. And if you're chronically undersleeping, those functions don't get completed efficiently. And that can build up over time and it can increase your risk for a variety of health conditions. So, 7 to 9 hours is the sleep spot. A very, very tiny subset of the population can get away with slightly less sleep, but we know that once you start getting into the 5-hour range or less, your risk for disease goes way, way up.
Yeah, I even heard that after, well, maybe you can confirm this, if this is true. I've heard before that those who are sleep deprived, when they get the flu shot, the annual flu shot, for example, they get less benefit from that flu shot because or they build fewer antibodies because they didn't get as much sleep. Is that a fair understanding of one element of not getting enough sleep?
Yeah, so possibly, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the immune system is highly active when we're asleep, especially when we're sick. So normally, even when we're not sick, the immune system is doing maintenance on itself. So it's creating new antibodies, it's producing new immune cells like white cells, killer T cells, all which are needed to keep us healthy. When we're sick, our immunity really ramps up its activity. It increases its production of antibodies and it starts releasing all of these attacking immune cells that go around the body and search out for pathogens. Now, you may notice that when you're feeling sick, you feel sleepier. More people are inclined to sleep when they're not feeling well. And scientists hypothesize that this is just the body's way of helping your immune system fight off that disease by sleeping so it can boost its activity.
Makes sense. So with that 7 to 9 hours, if I were to say, for example, go to sleep for 4 hours, wake up for a couple of hours, go back to sleep for 4 hours, would that have a similar benefit, or is that interruption too great?
Not necessarily. So there is a little bit of research on splitting your sleep up. So some people can split their sleep into 2 shifts where they do 3 hours and maybe 5 hours, or 4 hours and 4 hours. Honestly, it depends on how much sleep you need as an individual. And the evidence doesn't really show that it's detrimental to you. So as long as you're getting your recommended amount of sleep, you should be fine. The issue is that you have to time it appropriately because you want to make sure that you're waking up during either the end of a REM cycle or the start of a light sleep cycle. So it takes about 90 minutes to go through all 4 sleep stages. And you do that 90-minute rotation a few times when you're asleep. So you start in your light stage sleep, which is stage 1. This is when you're feeling very relaxed. You can still hear sounds, but your brain is actively in sleep. And then your sleep gets deeper and deeper as you go in later into the night. And usually in the second half of the night, we spend more time in REM. So what we don't want is for you to wake up during deep sleep, for instance, because this cuts off your REM sleep, which is unhealthy. And it also raises your risk of something called sleep inertia, where you wake up feeling incredibly groggy, maybe a little nauseous, very confused, and that can persist for a while. So you really want to time your sleep periods so that you're making sure that you're getting through an entire cycle of your sleep stages and you're waking up during the appropriate stage.
Gotcha. So if someone were to break up their sleep, they probably would want to make sure that that in both sets of sleep, they're sleeping for at least 90 minutes, or is there a minimum amount of, is that, am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, so
Okay.
90 minutes is about the average time it takes to get through one rotation. So maybe you double that for your first sleep bout. And then, your next one also takes into account how long it's going to take you to get through. Sometimes it takes a little bit of experimentation because your brain may take a little bit longer or a little bit shorter to get through all of your sleep stages. So playing around with the time that you're actually asleep can be very helpful until you land on a consistent amount of time where you wake up feeling really good and refreshed and not groggy.
Awesome. So you mentioned earlier how sleep can affect the brain, the immune system, nerves. Can you speak a little bit to how sleep can contribute to weight management and food cravings?
Yeah, I love this topic. It's a really, really interesting topic. So people who are chronically sleep deprived or have chronically poor sleep are at a much higher risk for weight gain and obesity than people who get consistent quality sleep at night. This is because when you're sleep deprived, the two hormones that regulate food and hunger and satiation, they get out of whack. So your hunger hormone, when you're sleep deprived, increases its activity. So your brain is stimulating that hormone. That hormone is more present, and that hormone will tell you, I'm hungry. I want high calorie foods. I don't feel full after I eat. And this is really a stress or survival response. When we're sleep deprived, our brain gets very confused and thinks we're in danger. And so it increases our body's stress response. It puts us into fight or flight mode. It raises our cortisol. And one of the survival mechanisms we have is to find food. So sleep deprivation equals increased hunger. People also tend to reach for higher calorie foods, so foods containing more sugar and fat, and they feel less satisfied after they eat. Conversely, the hormone that makes you feel full and satisfied gets suppressed. So when those two hormones are out of balance, we tend to find that people will gain weight over time. The other thing is it becomes a lot harder to lose weight. So once you've gained the weight, or if you're somebody who is trying to lose weight, it's a lot more difficult. We also know that the metabolism is suppressed. So your body is more likely to store energy as fat instead of releasing it. And research studies have shown that we can take two groups of individuals, one group that's sleep deprived and one group that's not sleep deprived. We can feed them the exact same diet, but the sleep deprived group is actually likely to gain weight, whereas the non-sleep deprived group is likely to gain no weight and maintain their weight. So even if you're on a healthy diet, your chance of gaining weight is still higher just because your metabolism is suppressed when you're sleep deprived.
Is that because your body is shutting down certain functions to focus on other functions when you're sleep deprived? Is that what would cause your metabolism to slow down?
Yeah, partially. And again, it goes back to the survival response. So anytime you're under a lot of stress, and sleep causes stress, it causes an upregulation of what we call your sympathetic nervous system. So that's the area of your nervous system that is responsible for fight or flight mode. When your nervous system tells your body it's highly stressed, it's going to start doing certain things. One, it's holding on to calories because it assumes that when I'm under stress, I'm gonna, not get the calories I need to survive. Secondly, when we're sleep deprived, our motivation to work out and exercise is a lot lower. We simply don't have the energy because we're so tired. So that's another factor that contributes to it. So just our ability to motivate ourselves to go to the gym or go for a walk or a run is a lot lower too. And third, your body is going to be constantly pressuring you to sleep, which means you're going to be more sedentary. So more lounging, more sitting, just less movement in general.
Yeah, there's I believe it's a book called The Power of Habit, where this term keystone behavior is used. We reference that term keystone behavior a lot here, and a keystone behavior is a behavior that influences other behaviors. So we often talk about sleep in our program to our guests as a keystone behavior because of what you just said, that when you're sleep deprived, everything else becomes harder. And it could be that if sleep is the one thing you do focus on and you do improve, everything else becomes a lot easier. So what you're saying makes perfect sense. And a lot of stuff that we share with our guests here. And something, there's a few things that you mentioned that you taught me something new today. That's pretty cool about, or that's fascinating that even on the same exact diet, same exact lifestyle, I didn't realize that someone who's sleep deprived would be more likely to gain weight than someone who isn't.
And that study was a large study, and it was in young college students who are, generally healthy and can put up with a lot more. So if young college students gained weight, then obviously your risk for weight gain as you get older is going to be much higher as well.
Wow. And that might be, a partial explanation for the freshman 15 if people staying up later. And so, okay, going to take a little bit of a turn here. So what are some things that people can do who are struggling with sleep? Or, before we started this podcast, you were sharing a little bit with me about different sleep disorders, different challenges people may be having with sleep. Can you speak a little bit to that? How people can identify those and what they can do to improve their sleep?
So 1/3 of Americans are poor sleepers. So you're either not getting enough sleep hours or your sleep quality is poor. And this makes sense because we live in a really stressful, fast-paced society. We try to pack too much into our day, and sleep often doesn't get the prioritization that it actually needs, even though sleep is so essential for maintaining health. So when we talk about getting good sleep quality, we are specifically talking about the 3 pillars of sleep, and that's what I'll go over right now. So the 3 pillars of sleep need to be met to get good quality sleep and maintain health. The first pillar is something we already talked about, which is your total sleep time. So this is the amount of sleep you actually get per 24 hours. Like we mentioned before, and I won't go back into this too much, adults need 7 to 9 hours on average. The amount of sleep you need is really dependent on your genetics, and what your body can accomplish, in a certain amount of time. The next pillar is sleep timing. So everybody has an internal biological clock called a circadian rhythm in their brain, and it's controlled by a handful of genes. And your circadian rhythm keeps time for you. It helps the body know when it's daytime and we need to be awake, and when it's nighttime and we need to be asleep. It also controls other functions like when we feel hungry, when we release certain hormones, when we repair things, when the immune system increases its activity, but primarily controls when we're asleep and when we're awake. So your circadian rhythm is also very, very dependent on your genetics. So you might be somebody who naturally feels inclined to go to sleep at 10 p.m., for instance, or you might be somebody who naturally feels inclined to go to sleep at 1 a.m. in the morning. So it just really depends. Ideally, we would be sleeping in a window that is very much aligned with our genetic circadian rhythm. When we try to sleep outside of that window, such as if you work weird shifts or if you frequently travel overseas, it really messes up your brain, and your brain cannot initiate sleep very well and keep you asleep very well because it's confused about the time. So that leads to really poor sleep quality. So, you want sleep timing or sleep time where you're sleeping 7 to 9 hours, and sleep timing where you're sleeping within your circadian window. And
sorry, I just got notified the battery's low on this laptop. Tony, do you have the charger? I would hate for this to cut off while you're speaking. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think it's charging now. The screen just lit up, so I think we're good. All right, so you were just talking about the circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
Okay, so maybe we could pick up there.
Okay, so yep, so making sure that you're sleeping at an appropriate time of night is also very important. And finally, sleep quality. So when we say sleep quality, we mean that your sleep is deep, undisturbed, and restorative. So that means that you're getting into those deeper stages. You're not waking up frequently, your sleep is not disturbed, and it's consistent throughout the night. So when you combine those three things, you should be getting pretty good sleep. If you're missing any of those things, then you can start to see some issues with sleep deprivation or poor sleep quality. And when you're not sleeping well, it's obvious. We all know when we're getting poor sleep because it results in us feeling unrefreshed the next day, groggy, moody. It starts to have long-term effects on your health. So it's fairly obvious. And this can result in things like an inability to fall asleep. Maybe, you have a really racing mind and it takes you forever to nod off. A lot of people experience an inability to maintain sleep. So maybe they fall asleep okay, but they wake up at some point during the night and they can't fall back to sleep. Or maybe they're waking up briefly throughout the night. So even though they're able to fall back to sleep, they're still waking up consistently enough that it's eating into their total sleep time and it's keeping them out of those deeper stages of sleep. So if you have any of those type of symptoms, then it's a pretty good indicator that you're not sleeping well and you're not sleeping well enough to maintain your health. As far as things that you can do to improve your sleep quality, a lot of the things are fairly obvious. So one thing we like to look at is your sleep hygiene. And the sleep hygiene means all of the habits and behaviors you have during the day and night that can affect your sleep quality. So some of these things, super obvious, like drinking coffee too late in the day, for instance. Everyone knows that you probably shouldn't be consuming caffeine before bedtime. Another big one that gets around is, looking into screens. So staring at your cell phone while you're in bed, not ideal because that light is very stimulating and it keeps the brain awake. Or keeping an uncomfortable bedroom. So if your bed is really uncomfortable, maybe there's a lot of light pollution, maybe your bedroom is very noisy, that's super problematic. Conversely, there's some things that people aren't super aware of that I always like to bring up. And these might not be super intuitive things, but these would be things like making sure you're actually getting plenty of sunlight during the day. So, especially in those early morning hours, you want to expose yourself to as much natural light as possible because this helps to regulate your circadian rhythm. So there's a huge list of sleep hygiene habits and techniques. I recommend going on the American Academy of Sleep Medicine's website to find those sleep hygiene habits. Go through that list and kind of check off each one and see where you can make improvements. The next thing is making sure you're on a really consistent sleep schedule that aligns with your circadian rhythm. So first you have to identify your sleep window. Are you a morning person? Are you a night person? Where are you most comfortable sleeping? And making sure that window allows you to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Once you figure out what your window is, making sure you're in bed, ready to sleep at the same time every single night, no exceptions, and awake at the same time every single morning, no exceptions. If you do that, that really helps your brain get into a routine, and that's going to help you fall asleep easier, and it's going to help you stay asleep throughout the night. And finally, maybe you're somebody who's already done all these things. You've been sleeping poorly for years. You've gone through all the lists. You've improved your sleep schedule. You've increased your exercise. You're eating healthier. You're doing everything the professionals have told you to, and you're still not sleeping properly. That's an indication that you may have a sleep disorder. So there's over 80 recognized sleep disorders. Some are a lot more common than others. The most common sleep disorders would be disorders like insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, some circadian disorders, narcolepsy, for instance. So it's really important that if you've been struggling for a long time, that you speak to your doctor and potentially get a referral for a sleep study. Of course, there's a wide variety of medical issues that can also cause sleep problems. So it's also important to have a full assessment of your health as well.
So I want to touch on something from the sleep hygiene segment that you shared about screens. So blue light seems to be kind of a buzzword that comes to mind when you say screen time. How much of it is specifically blue light versus, I've heard about these blue light glasses or certain apps that can reduce blue light. How much of it is blue light versus just any light, or can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So this goes back to your circadian rhythm specifically. Your circadian rhythm is regulated by light stimulation entering the eyes. So when sunlight enters your eyes, it stimulates a nerve in the back of your eye. And when this nerve is stimulated, it sends a message to your brain to suppress the production of a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is really important for sleep. So when melatonin is at really high levels in the brain, it tells your brain that it's time to go to sleep, and it helps your brain stay asleep throughout the night. So this makes sense, right? So when it's daytime and we're supposed to be awake, melatonin is suppressed. When it's dark and nighttime, when we're supposed to get ready for sleep, melatonin production is increased. When you're looking at screens emit blue spectrum light. Blue spectrum light is very, very similar to sunlight. So it mimics the light from the sun, stimulating that nerve in your eyes, and it suppresses melatonin in the brain. So your brain, when it's not able to make melatonin because you're looking into a screen, has no idea what time of day it is, and it doesn't know it needs to initiate sleep. So if you're somebody who's very sensitive or has issues falling asleep or staying asleep, you're not doing yourself any favors by using your phone or your laptop or watching a TV within the hour leading up to bed. So we always recommend that you try to put away your devices, at least the screen emitting devices, within an hour before you go to sleep. Now, blue light blocking glasses can filter out some of that light, but not all of that light. So, and like I said, some people are more sensitive to this than others. Some people have no issues sleeping. Other people really, really struggle. So if you're somebody who struggles, maybe read a book instead. Now, your fluorescent lights in your house have a similar effect, but not to the same level as blue light emitting glasses. But I always recommend to my clients, try to turn most of your lights off in the hour or two leading up to bed. Maybe use a reading lamp or light some candles to see, but try to dim your lights as much as possible.
Gotcha. So the blue light glass, it depends on the individual. The blue light glasses can help reduce. It might not get rid of all of it. And so in some cases, it might be a good step in the right direction, but ultimately it would be the ideal to remove the screen altogether.
Yeah, if you're somebody who absolutely cannot put away their devices, then blue light glasses can be helpful. You just have to be aware that it's not a perfect system.
That makes perfect sense. And so you mentioned that you brought up a good point about melatonin being suppressed. What would you say to somebody who asks, could I take over-the-counter melatonin to help me get to sleep? What are your thoughts on over-the-counter supplements or medications to help with sleep?
Mhm. So melatonin supplements are not inherently bad. They're not dangerous for you. It is something that we make in our brain naturally. So it's not like you're putting a foreign chemical into your body. The problem is that, at least in America, the supplement industry is not very well regulated. So a bottle of melatonin can say you're getting 2 milligrams of melatonin, but it may be more, it may be less. So you don't actually know how much melatonin you're putting into your system. The other issue is people really do use melatonin incorrectly. So when you use melatonin, you have to use it like a circadian rhythm regulator or a timekeeping hormone. It is not a sleep medication. Okay. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but it is not like taking an Ambien or a sleeping pill. It doesn't have the same effect. All melatonin is doing is telling your brain that this is the time that the brain needs to initiate sleep. So if you're somebody who takes melatonin at 10 p.m. one night, 11 p.m. another night, all you're doing is confusing your brain and you're not actually going to help yourself sleep better. So if you are going to take melatonin, ideally you would be taking it at the same time every single night, because this is going to help your brain keep time and initiate sleep. The other thing that people do is they tend to take too much melatonin. So melatonin has diminishing returns after a certain point, and it can actually cause more sleep problems. So I always recommend stay under 5 milligrams, start low and move up. Don't immediately go to 5 to 10 milligrams. People frequently tell me they took 5 melatonin pills and it did nothing for them. Well, that's because if you're flooding your brain with melatonin, it's actually having the opposite effect. It's actually going to make your sleep a lot worse. It's going to change your sleep architecture, which means how you travel through each sleep stage. So when it comes to melatonin, less is more. So it's okay to take, especially if you have issues falling asleep or staying asleep, but take low doses and take it at the same time every single night. And it shouldn't be something you're on forever. It really should only be used for short periods of time when you're struggling to sleep.
It almost seems counterintuitive if that when the body makes it naturally, the less light there is, your body makes more of it and it kind of pushes you to sleep. But when you take too much as a supplement, what's the mechanism that has the opposite effect there when you take it as a supplement?
Yeah, so when you flood your brain with melatonin, it can really cause how you move through your sleep stages. So, moving through sleep stages for most people is fairly predictable. We start in light sleep, stage 1. We're in light sleep for a while, then we move to stage 2, and then we move to stage 3, deep sleep. That's our slow wave sleep when our brain is the least active. And that's when a lot of those biological processes are happening. And we kind of do that cycle for a few revolutions in the first half of the night. And then once we've had enough deep sleep, our brain switches over to being more in REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, when we're dreaming. And that typically happens at the end of the night. When you add too much melatonin to your system, that all gets out of whack. You might enter REM sleep too early. You might have too much REM sleep. Your sleep might become very light and fragmented. And when your sleep architecture is dramatically changed, those biological processes we spoke about earlier just can't happen very efficiently, and that can result in feeling very groggy and unrested the next day. The next thing is when you're flooding your brain with melatonin, that can really affect your circadian rhythm. So it can affect the way your brain keeps time. Your brain might not be able to keep time, in the future as well as it would normally be able to.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. So the instinct to take too much melatonin, don't do it. Less is more. That's an important takeaway.
Yeah, and so just a reminder, it's not a sedative. It's not like taking an Ambien or any of the other sleep medications. It won't knock you out. It's simply telling the brain what time of day it is.
And so as far as those other sleep medications, when are they appropriate? When are they inappropriate? Who might consider using them?
Right. So generally, we reserve sleeping medications or prescription sleeping medications for people who have chronic, severe insomnia and some other sleep disorders as well. Now, it's usually a short-term solution. Unless it's for very, very specific cases where we may only prescribe a month or two of these medications to help people get sleep. Sometimes we prescribe it for people who have other issues like chronic pain, or people who are frequently traveling out of their time zone, things like that. Generally, it's kind of a last resort situation, though, because you can get very addicted to these medications and dependent on these medications, which means that if these medications go away, your sleep can actually get worse. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. There are some more gentle sleep medications that are over the counter. So these would be things like Unisom. Some people take Benadryl, some people take NyQuil. And again, these are fine in the short term, but we usually would not recommend that you're on these medications in the long term. It's better instead to assess what's actually wrong with you and see if we can treat that issue without medication before resorting to medication.
You are a wealth of knowledge. I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this. But for the sake of the time that we have today, I want to make sure we address sleep apnea. So I want to ask you about sleep apnea next. We have guests in our program who either they have sleep apnea or their spouse has sleep apnea, and or where they think they might have it. They snore a lot, and they're scared to get a sleep study because of they don't want to have a CPAP machine. I'm wondering if you can talk about the importance of addressing sleep apnea. Are there any alternatives to a CPAP? And if you could just kind of explore that for us a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So insomnia is the most common sleep disorder. Most of us will have insomnia in our lifetime. Following that, in second place, is sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is a sleep breathing disorder, which causes long pauses in our breathing while we sleep. Typically, this is due to something in our upper airways that's obstructing the airway or preventing air from getting through our mouth into our lungs. So when we have these frequent breathing pauses during sleep, that causes a drop in our blood oxygen levels. Our brain detects that. That's called hypoxia. And when our brain detects hypoxia, it will wake us up to restart breathing and normalize our oxygen. So people with sleep apnea can wake up many, many times per hour, depending on how severe your sleep apnea is. Sometimes it can be dozens of times, hundreds of times per hour. So because you're constantly waking up, this keeps your sleep very, very light, and you're not able to get that deep restorative sleep you need to maintain health. This leads to feeling very groggy and tired during the day. But in the long-term chronic sleep loss from sleep apnea and any other kind of sleep loss raises your risk for cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, cancer, poor mental health, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and a wide range of other health conditions. So health-wise, long-term untreated sleep apnea is very, very bad for you. It's very detrimental. So treating sleep apnea alleviates all of these health risks. And the primary way we treat sleep apnea, first and foremost, is with a CPAP machine, which is a machine that delivers pressurized air into your upper airways through a hose and mask, and that keeps your airways open. Now, like you said, a lot of people are worried about going on a CPAP because it looks kind of like a torture device, if we're being honest. Nobody wants to wear a mask that's connected to a machine all night long, but it is highly successful at keeping your airways open. With that said, there are many other sleep apnea treatments. So there are things like oral appliances that you can wear at night that are kind of like a retainer or a mouth guard. There's a device that's implanted into your chest that stimulates a nerve in your neck, and that can keep your airways open. There's various surgical procedures. And currently, there's actually a sleep apnea medication that's being tested as well. So you do have options. But the important point is your fear of using a CPAP should not put you off getting tested and treated because your long-term health risks are so high and problematic.
That makes perfect sense. So if you think you might have it, or if you have it, it's important to address it to make everything else to make all your other health concerns more possible to address.
Another point is that sleep apnea makes it nearly impossible to lose weight. For all the reasons we talked about earlier about how sleep affects weight loss and weight gain. And active sleep apnea also promotes weight gain. So even if you're eating healthy and exercising, you just might not find the results you're after if your sleep apnea goes untreated.
Makes perfect sense. Dr. Chelsie Rohrscheib, thank you so much. Do you have any final words of wisdom or any final messages that you would like our audience to hear from you today?
Yes, so most people have sleep issues, so you're not alone. And there is help in the world for you in the form of sleep physicians and doctors. There's sleep psychologists now. There's a wide range of treatments and programs available. So if you've been struggling with your sleep for a really long time, talk to your doctor and get options for how you can be treated.
Do you have any other channels of education or communication if our listeners today want to continue learning more from you? Is there a place they can go to do that?
Yeah, so I'm the head sleep expert at Wesper. That's WESPER. We are a sleep disorder diagnostics company. We do in-home sleep testing for sleep apnea. So if you suspect you have sleep apnea, but you don't want to do a lab study, you can do a study in the comfort of your own home. But we also offer a variety of sleep education tools. I run a lot of seminars. I write a lot of articles. So feel free to check out our website. That's www.wesper.co. So that's .co.
Very cool. Dr. Chelsie Rohrscheib, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Maybe we'll have to have you back on sometime. I feel like there's so many questions I still have for you about sleep.
Yeah, anytime. Absolutely. It was great.
Right.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of Health Talk. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Remember, at the end of the day, these episodes are for you. So be sure to comment. Let us know what you thought of the interview today. Let us know what other questions you have, what other topics you'd like to learn about, and who else you'd like us to interview. So again, thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next time.